Part 8, The Wild Bantha Chase. So this is another one of those Hector Mode only chapters. Not a good sign. During their quest to obtain the Fire Emblem, Hector obtained some intel from the village, indicating it might be in this remote area. But it's actually a trap set by Sonia to get Hector killed by Pascal, a dangerous prisoner of the Black Fang. She frees Pascal from his cell in the fortress, so he and a gazillion Black Fang troops can go and kill Hector. Now, unlike most of the other Black Fang bosses, Pascal actually has a backstory, but they made it as contradictory to what we know about the Black Fang as they possibly could. Pascal used to be a noble of a territory in Bern, until he invited a bunch of citizens to his castle and slaughtered them for no reason, because he's a total sadist. He lost his title and fled from the king and joined the Black Fang. So basically, Pascal is a perfect example of someone targeted by the old Black Fang for assassination. He's a noble who abused his power and murdered the innocent. So what did the Black Fang do with him? Just made him one of the four fangs. What the fuck? So how did he end up in this cell? He was basically welcomed in the Black Fang for killing civilians. What did he do to get imprisoned again? Help an old lady cross the street? Why did they imprison him anyway, instead of just killing him, like they do with every corrupt noble? Who knows? The game isn't telling us. Just that Sonia is releasing him so that we can have another filler chapter. You know, for a completely superfluous Hector Mode exclusive chapter, they really put a surprising amount of effort into contradicting themselves multiple times. Most of the time, this game just doesn't explain anything, but here they broke new ground by having explanations that make it all even more confusing. That's really all there is to say about this chapter itself. In a way, that makes it one of the best chapters in my opinion, because there's only like a couple contradictions. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to rant about something else. The fact that we have 3 lords and 3 modes or stories when we only really needed one. So this game's story at its core basically revolves around Eliwood. All the game's major events are centered around him, and the subtitle of the game in Japanese even refers to his personal weapon in this game, the Durandal. So why are there 3 modes anyway? Well, FE7 as a game almost certainly came about due to intelligent systems wanting to experiment a little without having to drastically innovate. After all, they just made their first game without Kaga at the helm, and even that was heavily influenced by the original Arcanean saga. Oh, and if you don't know who that is, he was the director and lead creative input of Fire Emblem from 1 to 5. Reusing their new setting would allow them to flex their creative muscles a little, without having to invest as much time and effort on creating their world. I reckon this is fairly apparent, due to how rather removed FE7 is in many regards from other Fire Emblem titles, but since there's not really much room in FE6 for a sequel, they decided to do a prequel. And since Roy was the protagonist of FE6, making his dad the protagonist of a prequel was just kind of a no-brainer. Now I can't say for sure how exactly Hector was factored into all of this, but I bet he was originally just going to be an important supporting character. However, clearly somewhere along the line, the executive call to localize the series following the success of Advance Wars and the interest shown in Marth and Roy in Super Smash Bros. Melee inspired the idea for an extended tutorial, and a new character in Lyn. The idea for separate modes was most likely part of a brainstorming session, or the like, combining these elements together. But really, when you look at the execution of it all, Hector and Lyn's modes are pretty awkwardly inserted. I've already pointed out how Lyn's story is irrelevant to the point where the Japanese players could just skip it, and there are even aspects of it that make the main story weaker, if that's even possible. Like how Ninian and Nils end up escaping from Nurgle's clutches multiple times instead of just once with the help of Albert. Even the way that they try to bring Lyn back into Eliwood's path is awkward, with an unexplained and unnecessary invasion of Kaelin that served no purpose other than to reintroduce Lyn and her retainers. But we kinda discussed that already, so what is the problem with Hector and Hector Mode? Hector's story is presented as a new tale that is supposed to add replay value to the game, but almost everything is the same as Eliwood's story. There are some minor gameplay differences like item and character availability or enemy composition, but these are all pretty minor, and story-wise, all you really get are a few extra scenes with a different perspective. The only major difference is the addition of some new chapters like this one. But because the core story is still Eliwood's, basically none of these chapters can have a meaningful or interesting development relating to the core plot, which essentially means they're filler. In fact, nearly all of these chapters actually end up contradicting other elements of the plot, which further betrays the fact that they are afterthoughts. The Black Fang going after Hector in chapter 11 makes no sense, and the explanation for how Hector ends up meeting with Eliwood after running across the entire country sucks too. Then chapter 15 has that whole "I'm sick of waiting around" thing that goes into "It's been 5 days." And this one just shits all over the way the game tries to portray the Black Fang. The exception to this trend is 19XX, but that shouldn't have been a Hector Mode exclusive, let alone a fucking Gaiden within a Gaiden behind 2 stupid requirements. Now you're probably thinking something like, but those few extra scenes with Hector, Uther and Oswin really add to the characters. And yeah, I'd agree they do. But the thing is, with the exception of chapter 11, all those scenes happen in chapters that are in Eliwood mode anyway. So there really wasn't a point in separating the two, because it's not like the game's regular story is exclusively shown from the protagonist's point of view. Instead of thinking that Hector mode is adding these elements, the reality is that these elements were cut from the initial main story that became Eliwood mode to be placed into Hector mode. The most heinous example of this is, spoilers, Uther's death. The fact that Uther is dead never comes up in Eliwood mode at all, and the only inkling you get is Hector's weird changes in behavior. In Hector's story they make an appropriately big deal out of it, and in the final chapter Eliwood even reveals that he knew, so there's no excuse as to why it's not there in Eliwood's story. Furthermore, the base script is littered with sections where elements of Hector's character have to be awkwardly brought into focus to compensate for the lack of these removed scenes. But since the base script is shared between Eliwood and Hector mode, the explanatory bits end up feeling wholly unnecessary. Consider this section from the end of New Resolve. Hector is somewhat subtly expressing his reluctance to contact Uther, but Lyn's interjection gives Eliwood an excuse to spell out Hector's motivations to the player. In the context of Eliwood mode, whilst there have been a few hints as to how Hector's relationship with his brother was strained, it was all low-key enough that making it clear is a reasonable decision for the writers to make. But in Hector's story, we're very aware of what Hector thinks of his brother, so the scene serves no purpose other than to beat us over the head with stuff we already know. Other common occurrences of this can be seen in the trivial, banal bickering and goofing around that Hector and Lyn partake in frequently. Some of these scenes are actually Hector mode exclusive, but they're mostly the ones that push the somewhat awkward Hector-Lyn ship, rather than being predominantly a reinforcement of Hector's characteristics. I realize that to an extent, some of these scenes help to give us a broader perspective of these characters, in that we get to see them in more relaxed contexts, but I'd argue that most of them don't actually convey anything meaningful, and mostly just serve as reminders of their presence and character traits. Now I'm aware that I'm beginning to veer off into criticism of Hector and Lyn as characters, which is not what I'm intending to do. I'm trying to highlight how the modular structure of this game was detrimental to the overall characterization, and how these two characters in particular suffer from it. I think I've made it pretty clear I'm not a fan of Lyn, but even I can admit that she's reasonably distinctive within her own mode. But in Eliwood and Hector's stories, the writers have to literally come up with excuses for Lyn to be relevant or for her to say anything at all, which tends to result in her dialogue or actions either being completely replicable by someone else, or they could just be omitted entirely. In fact, there's a pretty good example of this in the very next chapter. The introduction to this chapter is so stupid that I'm going to pay someone to read it out loud, to make sure you're processing exactly how dumb it is. I didn't make this up, this is what they actually wrote.
We finally arrived. I can't believe they built a palace in these mountains. Bern is the only country on the continent where wyverns still fly. With its wyvern riders, I imagine this castle is the best defended anywhere. I agree. Look at the path leading up to the mountain's face. It would be impossible to scale that in a direct assault. Defenders positioned higher up would have a clear advantage. Even the best soldiers would be taken out with ease. Look at that. They don't have any sentries posted. They must have a lot of faith in their defenses. Look at these surroundings. They probably make do simply with patrols within the castle. The mighty Bern. I'd not like it as an enemy. And yet, from this impregnable fortress, a treasure was stolen. Perhaps the king really is responsible for all this. It's hard to imagine any thief cracking Bern's defenses. You're right, but I can't imagine why the king would do this. To find the Fire Emblem, we're going to need clues. Listen, why don't we try sneaking into the castle?
Is it just me? Is this real? Is this happening? Did they actually spend all that time hyping up the castle's impregnable, super good defenses, only for Lyn to go, let's just sneak in. No possible objections? I know Hector is supposed to be reckless, but Eliwood? I guess the fact nobody had a bad feeling about this meant they were in the clear. They don't even seem to run into any problems at all. How can a castle they spent so much time praising the defenses of be so poorly defended? This is the royal palace. This is where the king lives. How can there be no sentries anywhere? What the fuck, Burn? I mean, I guess I can sort of see what the writers were going for, in that the natural defenses of the castle are so amazing that the guards were really complacent, but this is still beyond absurd. I get the feeling they went with this to avoid having to come up with a creative way for them to sneak in, and instead they just get to walk through the front door. So they all hide in the garden and observe how much of a dick Desmond is to Zephiel. Then, once Desmond is alone, Sonia reveals herself. It turns out Desmond did indeed have the Fire Emblem, quote-unquote, stolen by the Black Fang, and the Fang are keeping it safe inside their fortress. Now, you might expect me to complain about how stupid and risky this plan is on Desmond's part, getting involved with a group known for targeting corrupt nobles. But we can reasonably infer from Nurgle's orders to Limstella in chapter 19 that they already set up contact with Desmond before, so it's not too far-fetched that they proposed some version of this deal to him at an earlier point in time. And Desmond has every reason to use people outside of his inner circle to take the Fire Emblem, since he doesn't want to be implicated in its theft. Desmond then asks about his other request. Sonia says one of the 4 Fangs will tend to it, and that there won't be any mistakes. However, she questions whether or not Desmond is alright with General Murdoch being finished too. Desmond is slightly torn, saying losing Murdoch would be a great blow to Burn, and that he will think of something to remove him from Zephiel's side. Sonia then has a bad feeling.
I have a bad feeling about this.
But it gets negated since Guinevere shows up at the same time. Desmond decides to demonstrate just how much of a dick he can be to baby foxes. What an asshole! Anyway, the lords feel the need to spell out for us what these developments mean. Eliwood and Hector summarize the whole Nurgle summoning dragons with the Aid of War thing. Why? You know, sometimes in storytelling it's okay to do a brief recap, like if the writer does it at the start of a new chapter, or if the characters are explaining their predicaments to a new party member, or if they're having an introspective moment about past events. But every character present in this scene has known all of this since Kinship's Bond. All you had to say was, we need to get to the Black Fang's fortress. This makes me feel like the game thinks I'm too dumb to understand the plot and remember what's going on. Speaking of remembering what's going on, remember what Sonia, the de facto leader of a League of Assassins, was talking about before he got distracted by a fox? Something about whether it would be okay if they finished off Murdoch, Zephiel's bodyguard, too? And then the king said, I'll think of something to send Zephiel's bodyguard away from Zephiel. So, if you're familiar with the game, you might be wondering why I'm making such a big deal out of this. Sure, the lords are dumb for not connecting the dots here, and only realizing what Desmond and Sonia are plotting when it's explicitly spelled out later. But there's another major issue here. What the fuck was the point of Desmond having the Black Fang steal the Fire Emblem if he also told them to assassinate Zephiel? Can you imagine him going up to Sonia, like...
Okay, I need you guys to do 2 things for me. 1, steal the Fire Emblem so that Zephiel's coming of age ceremony cannot happen. Yeah, we can do that. What's the other thing? Kill Zephiel before his coming of age ceremony. Sure. Are we being paid by the hour? Do you accept MasterCard? No, but you can pay with influence over your nation. Alright, sounds good. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great.
That's great.
It's gonna be great.
That's gonna be great.
It's gonna be great.
That's gonna be great.
Let's try to break this down. There is a strong implication from Desmond and Helene's conversation in Four-Fanged Offense that if the Fire Emblem is not returned within 10 days, Zephiel's coming of age ceremony cannot happen. This is further reinforced by Helene telling Pent that there is a time limit of 10 days. If this wasn't the case, then finding the Fire Emblem at any point in the future would be fine, and Helene wouldn't need to specify the morning of the 10th day from today, nor would she be pissing her knickers at the prospect of the ceremony not going ahead immediately. However, if all of this is true, why does Desmond need Zephiel assassinated? The point of stealing the Fire Emblem is to prevent him from being heir to the throne, right? so that's something he cares about. He wouldn't have had the Fire Emblem stolen by the Black Fang if that wasn't true. So assassinating him is kind of like overkill, isn't it? I mean, like, it's not even just overkill if you don't want it to be named Ear, and killing him achieves that too, right? So, if you were willing to kill him, why did you have the Fire Emblem stolen? None of this makes any sense. Technically, there is only one way for all of this to work, sort of, and that's if you assume Desmond is the biggest idiot ever, and that what the script tells us about the coming of age ceremony is wrong. Now, I'm not a fucking apologist. If you have to make this shit up and go against the script for things to work, then it's not a real defense. The script is still shit. Now, I'm still not 100% sure if this is intentional, but the contradiction between Desmond's two orders is pretty hard to catch on your first playthrough, due to the fact that the lords just can't wait to do that dumb, superfluous recap. But it's even worse if you're replaying the game and you're familiar with the story, because now you're thinking, oh, I know this already. Desmond wants Zephiel assassinated, and I remember this happening 2 chapters later. Your familiarity with the script blinds you to the contradiction. It's like next level bad writing. If this was on purpose, then the writer should really consider a career as used car salesman. And just like with how Nurgle doesn't summon dragons 6 months before the main game starts, I have never seen anyone point out this problem before. It seems impossible to catch, unless you're doing what I'm doing, and combing through the entire script with a used toothpick, so that might lend more credit to the intentionality of it all. Moving on, the scene cuts to Nils and Ninian, who are outside, alone and unprotected. I know we're not on the Dread Isle anymore, but it seems pretty foolish to me to not at least have someone like Marcus or Oswin nearby. The game even makes a point of saying everyone is scattered about when the chapter starts. Why not hide in the village nearby, or some other secluded spot? Hector then delivers probably the most amazingly well written line in the game. Oh no, look, it's a wyvern rider. Suddenly, Eliwood immediately knows that the rider in question is female, even though she's quite far away from them. I guess Eliwood's X-ray vision superpowers are complemented by the same eagle eye vision that Florina has. I mean, I can't even tell Vida's a woman from up close. Nils says he can't sense Vida because the riders needed them to be caught off guard by Vida's attack. But throughout this entire game, it's been made clear that the two of them have very little capability to do anything, even when they do sense danger. So what is the point? This never comes up later anyway, and Vida has like a whole army with her too, which just makes it even stranger. God, I can't believe I'm actually advocating for them to have another bad feeling about this. Vida has been magically boosted by Nurgle, and as a result, she's extremely confident and bloodthirsty. Now I know I said this analysis would only be focused on the story, but this map's objective of survive clashes really badly with how Vida is programmed. She just sits there on a mountain, despite making it very clear that she's really anxious to get involved in the battle. Then after the turn limit is up, she says she's had it with being pushed here and there, and sounds to retreat. Vida says that the palace has promised to stay out of this, so is she with the palace? Are we being attacked by the Black Fang, or by Burn's forces? The enemies are listed as Black Fang, but most of them are wyvern riders, and Vida says she's loyal only to the throne of Burn. I mean, if they're with the palace, and she seems to have an idea of who Eliwood is, and his friends, then aren't they screwed? Because they were supposed to keep this all a secret? If they're separate, and they're all Black Fang, how is it possible for them to have the palace keep out of it? Is there some kind of prior agreement that the castle guard won't get involved in large skirmishes happening right on their fucking doorstep? Or did Vida ask the castle guard not to get involved before she confirmed that the people outside were her targets? Why would the castle guard agree to this anyway? Do they all know about Desmond's association with the Black Fang? So much for keeping the whole stealing the Fire Emblem thing under the radar. My brain hurts. Also, remember how the lords have been wearing disguises and sneaking around so that they wouldn't get found out and give Burn an excuse to start a war on Lycia? Apparently that's no longer an issue, because not only are the lords willing to fight right in front of the royal palace, Pent and Louise are too. Finally, Pent gives the main lord a heaven seal, but they cannot use it. I want to complain about this, but it's not particularly relevant right now, so I will save it for later. During the battle, you can find Ursula in a village. She gives you a hammer and staff, and asks you to take down Vida, because she doesn't want Vida to take the glory. Besides the fact that a staff that repairs stuff won't be all that useful against Super Saiyan 3 Vida, Don't you think a better way to take credit away from her is to kill Eliwood and co right then and there? Ursula was assigned by Sonia to take down Eliwood all the way back in Kinship's Bond, and unlike the Reed brothers, Ursula is really devoted to Sonia, so she has no reason to go against her orders. What does Ursula think Sonia is going to do if she finds out that she gave them a hammer and staff? Ursula even foreshadows the fact that the Lords will see her again with a sinister laugh. This whole conversation just didn't need to be there. Ursula never shows this kind of jealousy again, although I guess not carrying out important business she's been ordered to do is in character for her, considering what she was doing all the way back in Chapter 7X. When the battle is over, Hector says that the palace is in an uproar, once again demonstrating long-distance X-ray vision superpowers, but what he claims to be the case doesn't make sense. Didn't the palace promise to stay out of this? Was Vida lying? Maybe she was wrong about how they only just noticed? Ugh. Not to mention the fact that they were able to get away without being noticed or identified. Lyn says that they could follow Vida's troops to find the Black Fang fortress. So they are Black Fang? But then she says that Burn's foot soldiers are slow and clumsy. So which is it?
Lyn says nothing about burn or clumsiness in the Japanese line. She just says that to a native of Saka, humans are easier to track than rabbits. So like, half the line is completely made up and just makes things more confusing.
Good job, guys. You made a confusing game even more confusing. I guess Vida's entire group was Black Fang then. This is the example I was talking about last chapter, by the way. This moment is the only instance in the whole of Eliwood or Hector Mode where Lyn does something important. But this is only the case because the scene has been arbitrarily written to give Lyn something to do. Not only are there other candidates to track enemies, they didn't even necessarily need a dedicated tracker. Could have just followed them. All you need to do is have a small group tailing the enemy army directly, and relay the directions back periodically to your main group. Considering they just pulled a Metal Gear Solid on the Royal Castle, they can't be that bad at not being noticed, right? But no, we gotta give Lyn something to do. Let's just get a move on already. This chapter, like chapter 24, has two versions depending on the levels of some of your characters. The differences in the story between them are even smaller this time around. In one of them, the boss is a psychopath named Kenneth who wants to kill the Lords, and in the other, the boss is a psychopath named Jeremy who wants to kill the Lords. Man, why is the Black Fang supposed to be sympathetic again? Maybe Kenneth came with Nurgle like Jafar did, but Jeremy says he was top dog before Jafar showed up. Pascal, anyone? So Lyn tracks Vida's forces through the mountains to the Black Fang's secret fortress. I still don't get how all these places stay secret, when people can fly around as they please, but I guess at least this place is on a secluded mountaintop, so it's not as dumb as the Shrine of Seals. However, the Lords haven't arrived yet, so the opening scene is set inside the fortress, where Sonia is chewing Vida out for her failure. Vida apologizes for having shitty AI, and says she will never be able to fly again as a Royal Wyvern Knight, without Nurgle's help, which is supposed to confirm that she's an employee of the Black Fang right now. But then Sonia says that Vida will be spared the Fang's judgment because she's an outsider. God fucking damn it, make your mind up, game. When I was working on the first draft of this review, I was still confused at this point, and had to clarify via supports to understand what Vida's deal was. And can I also just say, what's even the point of this Fang's judgment shit anyway? It never actually serves an important purpose in the story, because, spoilers, nobody ever fucking dies because of it. Except that one guy in 7X, but he killed himself, so that doesn't really count. The only reason it's here, along with that other stupid rule about sacrificing the wounded, is to make the Black Fang seem ominous and creepy, but in reality it just makes them look stupid and dumb. Firstly, the people who should be getting penalized for failing, like I don't know, Ursula or Pascal, are never reprimanded by anyone. Second, there's this weird, positive Robin Hood-esque honorable portrayal that the Fang seems to have, even amongst their inner members. This clashes horribly with the idea of an organization that murders their own if they make a mistake or if they are injured. Anyway, Sonia delivers one of the few good lines in this game, telling Vida, "You stink of failure, leave me to breathe in peace." That's what I used to tell my daughter before she got herself killed attacking the wrong enemies. Vida leaves in disgrace, and then Sonia calls in Ursula, and basically tells her not to disappoint her like Vida did. I could have neglected to mention this part since it's irrelevant to the plot. In fact, it might as well not be there, which seems to be what the localizers thought too, because half of the time you play this map, this Ursula conversation isn't even there. Just like with some errors before, somehow the English localization team managed to fuck the script up, so that in the German version of this chapter, the whole Ursula scene is missing for no fucking reason. The original Japanese game has this scene in both variants of the map. If you don't believe me, you can check the description for proof. I can't even begin to guess how this happened, so I'm not going to, but still, how embarrassing. The Lords spot Vida leaving, and as such, they're convinced that this is the Black Fang's base. They decide to sneak around to listen in on what's happening in the fortress. Inside, Sonia says she's got an important job for Nino, a request from the king. Brendan objects, saying it's too dangerous for a child, but Sonia rebukes, saying that she'd like to have Brendan's sons do it instead, but since they're AWOL, Nino gets the job. First of all, what kind of shitty argument is that? Literally anyone in the Black Fang, an assassin's guild, is better for this job than Nino. I know Sonia is doing this on purpose to get rid of Nino, but that doesn't explain why Brendan, the leader of the guild, doesn't just suggest using someone else. I mean, there's Jafar, Jeremy, Kenneth, Ursula. Heck, even a random generic mook would probably be better for this job than a 14-year-old girl who has never killed anyone in her entire life. They're practically spoiled for choice, because this stupid assassin's guild is more like an army. Second of all, what the hell has the Reed brother been doing all this time? You know, the one that isn't dead? Wasn't their job back in Four-Fanged Offense to go and talk to Brendan? And then when he finds his brother dead, is telling Brendan not one of the first things that he would do? Then Sonia calls for Jafar, and tells him that it's his mission, and he has to take Nino along. What was the point of the first half of the conversation then? And then Sonia, Jafar and Nino all leave to prepare to assassinate the prince. It's just like a family vacation. The mom, the daughter, and the boyfriend. Except the mom is some kind of sex zombie who isn't actually a mom, and the boyfriend is a comedically edgy serial killer. The Lords attempt to go after them, but they're stopped by a lazy plot device, magical barrier, supposedly created by Nurgle. I was gonna complain about how stupid this was, but then I realized I was putting more effort into criticizing it than the writers did coming up with it. There's also two recruitable characters in this map. One is Karel, who is a member berry for FE6 players who bother to read his Noah support, and another stupid edgelord character for anyone else. I might talk about him some more later, because he's a pretty good example of some of the structural issues that I will be getting into in my closing thoughts. The other one is Harkon, who is one of Elbert's former knights. He'd be pretty unremarkable too, if not for the fact that the dialogue he delivers when he appears is pretty bizarre.
Intruders? Let them go. We have nothing against you. We must gain the trust of the Black Fang and get close to that man. We must avenge the death of our liege, Lord Elbert.
We? Who is he talking to? Himself? Is he crazy? He talks normally everywhere else.
This is a bad translation. The basic gist of the lines is correct, yet there's all this "we" lying around for no reason. And I don't really understand how this happened. A rough translation would read like this. They're intruders? Forgive me, I bear you no grudge, but I must gain the trust of the Black Fang. I must avenge my Lord Elbert.
Anyway, they fight, the boss dies, and they find the Fire Emblem on the corpse, and they leave. Oh thank god, this stupid subplot is over. Oh fuck, wait. We still have to deal with the assassination. Speaking of assassination, Sonia tells Jafar to kill Nino after he kills Sephiel. Apparently, this is so cold-blooded that even Mr. Cold Steel the Hedgehog is taken aback and can't believe what he's being told to do. Now that's cold. Now Sonia's orders might be the stupidest things I have ever read and heard. Let me go through them. Number 1, they're gonna hang a dead body. Number 2, they're gonna assume that a 14-year-old girl was an assassin sent to kill the prince. Number 3, won't anyone want to know where the assassin came from? Number 4, won't anyone wonder who killed the 14-year-old girl? And number 5, why am I doing this review?